My stepson invited me after 10 years of silence, and the message came on a quiet Tuesday evening. I remember staring at my phone, reading the words again and again, as if they might change. "Hi, Mom. I know it's been a long time. I was hoping you could come visit me. I'd really like that." My hands trembled slightly. For a decade, I had learned how to live with absence, how to pack away memories and survive without answers. And yet, in that moment, all of it came rushing back. The laughter, the arguments, the misunderstandings, and the pain that had slowly built a wall between us. I became his stepmother when he was 12, an awkward age already filled with confusion and quiet resentment. His father and I married after a difficult divorce, and though I tried my best, I was always an outsider in his eyes. I cooked his favorite meals, attended his school events, and stayed up late waiting when he went out with friends. But love offered too quickly can feel suspicious to a child who was still grieving. When his father passed away suddenly, everything shattered. Grief turned into blame, and I became the easiest target. One argument became many, and one day he packed his bags and left without looking back. For years I told myself that he needed time, that one day he would understand. I sent birthday messages that went unanswered and holiday cards that were never acknowledged. Eventually, I stopped sending them, not because I stopped caring, but because rejection hurts more when it repeats itself. Life moved forward in a quiet, lonely way. I found comfort in routine, morning walks, volunteering at the local library, and long evenings with old photo albums I pretended not to open too often. So, when his invitation arrived, fear and hope collided inside me. I didn't know which emotion would win. Part of me wanted to protect myself, to say no and preserve the fragile peace I had built. Another part, the one that never stopped loving him, whispered that this might be my last chance. After a sleepless night, I replied with a simple message: "I'd love to come." As soon as I sent it, I felt both relief and dread. The journey to his city felt longer than it actually was. On the plane, memories played like an old film. Him learning to ride a bike, the first time he called me Mom by accident, the last argument that ended with slammed doors and broken words. I wondered what he looked like now, what kind of man he had become, and whether there was still room in his life for me. When I arrived, he was waiting outside the airport. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He was taller, broader, with traces of his father in his eyes. The boy I remembered was gone, replaced by someone both familiar and distant. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Thanks for coming." I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would betray me. The drive to his home was quiet, filled with pauses instead of conversation. His house was modest but warm, decorated with simple furniture and family photographs. I noticed one picture in particular, him and his father on a camping trip. It made my chest tighten. Over dinner, we talked about safe topics: work, the weather, the city. Every sentence felt carefully measured, as if we were both afraid to step on emotional landmines. Later that night, he finally broke the silence. He told me he had spent years angry at the world, convinced that everyone who loved him eventually left. He admitted that after his father's death, he didn't know how to handle the pain, and blaming me felt easier than facing his grief. As he spoke, his voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability instead of resentment. I listened without interrupting, letting him release years of bottled-up emotions. When he finished, I shared my side: the loneliness, the confusion, the nights I cried wondering what I had done wrong. I told him I never tried to replace his mother, only to stand beside him if he would let me. Tears flowed freely, and in that moment, something heavy lifted from the room. The days that followed were slow and healing. We cooked together, laughed over small mistakes, and took long walks where conversation came more easily. He introduced me to his friends, proudly saying, "This is my stepmom." Each word felt like a small victory. We visited places from his childhood, and he apologized for the years of silence. I told him forgiveness wasn't something I needed time to give. It was already there. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he admitted why he had invited me. He said he was getting married and wanted me there. The news caught me off guard, and joy mixed with disbelief. He reached for my hand and said, "I don't want to start this new chapter without you." In that moment, I realized the invitation wasn't just about a visit. It was about rebuilding a family. When it was time to leave, the goodbye felt different from before. There was no bitterness, only warmth and promise. At the airport, he hugged me tightly and said, "Don't be a stranger." I smiled, knowing that distance no longer meant disconnection. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and reflected on how fragile and resilient relationships can be. Time can create wounds, but time can also create understanding if we allow it to. My stepson invited me back into his life, and in doing so, he healed parts of me I didn't even realize were still broken. Sometimes, the most powerful invitations are not to places, but to forgiveness, growth, and love reborn. After that visit, I returned home, but my mind stayed with him. Every morning I woke up thinking about the sound of his voice, the way he looked at me with cautious hope. We began talking regularly, small messages at first, then longer calls. Sometimes we talked about nothing important, and sometimes we talked about everything we had avoided for years. Each conversation stitched together a bond that had once been torn apart. A few months later, I received another message from him. This time, it was more detailed. He asked if I could come early before the wedding to help with preparations. The request moved me deeply. It wasn't just an invitation, it was trust. I packed my bags again, feeling less fear and more excitement this time. When I arrived, he hugged me without hesitation, and I realized how far we had come. Wedding preparations were stressful, but they brought us closer. We argued over flowers and seating arrangements, laughed at old family stories, and even cried together when memories of his father surfaced. One night, while organizing old boxes, we found letters his father had written but never sent. Reading those letters together changed everything. They spoke of love, regret, and hope for the future, things neither of us had fully understood then. As the wedding day approached, my stepson confided his fears in me. He worried about becoming a husband, about repeating mistakes from the past, about losing people he loved. I listened, just as I had years ago, and reassured him that fear didn't mean failure. It meant he cared. In that moment, I wasn't just his stepmother, I was his family. On the day of the wedding, he surprised me by asking if I could walk him part of the way down the aisle. The room fell silent as he made the announcement. Tears streamed down my face as I accepted. That simple gesture healed wounds that words never could. I felt his father's presence in that moment, proud and at peace. After the wedding, our relationship didn't magically become perfect, but it became real. We had disagreements, misunderstandings, and moments of silence, but now, silence no longer meant separation. It meant space, understanding, and patience. We learned that family isn't about perfection, it's about staying when things get hard. Years passed, and our bond only grew stronger. Holidays were no longer lonely, the house filled with laughter, shared meals, and new traditions. When his first child was born, he called me before anyone else. Hearing him say, "You're a grandmother now," felt like a blessing I never expected. Holding my grandchild for the first time, I realized how life comes full circle. Pain gives way to healing, loss to love, and silence to connection. My stepson once walked out of my life without a goodbye, but he walked back in with an invitation that changed everything. Looking back, I understand that forgiveness is not a single moment, it's a journey. It requires courage from both sides. When my stepson invited me, he wasn't just asking me to visit, he was asking me to forgive, to understand, and to love again. And I'm grateful every day that I said yes. This story isn't just about a stepmother and a stepson. It's about second chances, about choosing compassion over pride, and about believing that even broken relationships can be rebuilt if we allow our hearts to remain open. After that visit, I returned home, but my mind stayed with him. Every morning I woke up thinking about the sound of his voice, the way he looked at me with cautious hope. We began talking regularly, small messages at first, then longer calls. Sometimes we talked about nothing important, and sometimes we talked about everything we had avoided for years. Each conversation stitched together a bond that had once been torn apart. A few months later, I received another message from him. This time, it was more detailed. He asked if I could come early before the wedding to help with preparations. The request moved me deeply. It wasn't just an invitation, it was trust. I packed my bags again, feeling less fear and more excitement this time. When I arrived, he hugged me without